The ABC's John Barron has been covering US politics for more than 20 years and is a research associate at the United States Studies Centre. John, welcome to The Drum.
Hi, Julia.
Now, an instant, fiery, angry response. Do you see this decision as a surprise?
It's hard to say it's a surprise. We haven't known what's been going on in the grand jury. The 12 jurors have heard over 70 hours of evidence, and they've reached the conclusion that there isn't enough evidence to say that this is an indictment would be successful. So essentially, the police officer who shot Michael Brown, an unarmed 18-year-old, a total of 12 times. Until the final fatal shot to the top of his head after stopping him in the street over a petty theft, alleged theft of some cigarillos from a convenience store. They've decided that this was in the line of his duty, and the circumstances were such that this was not an undue use of force. Now, of course, that has led to weeks and weeks of violent protests on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. Everybody in the United States has an opinion on this, for and against what the police officer was doing, but because so much of this, what amounted to a hearing in front of the grand jury, was done in secret, a lot of the evidence is unknown, and hence the level of discontent we're now seeing on the streets. How
could you prove what is of greatest concern here to a lot of people who've been writing and protesting, which is racial profiling? Certainly the numbers would seem to indicate that a vast majority of those stopped and checked and arrested on the streets of Ferguson are African American, but there is an investigation undergoing into that right now, is there not?
Yeah, there is. And look, I mean, the fundamental statistics of being a black man in America are simply astonishing. 1 in 3 black men will go to jail in their lifetime. They are 6 times as likely to be arrested and sent to jail as white men. When they are arrested and put to trial, they are given longer jail sentences than non-coloured people. So there is an issue in the United States. And does this lead to, is this a result of police profiling, or is it because there are more African men involved in African American men involved in petty crimes? The evidence says that they're no more likely to be involved in drug crimes, for instance. They are more likely to be arrested and jailed for them, though. So there is an issue here. But, of course, we've seen this for more than 20 years in the case of the Rodney King bashing and so on. It's as much the reaction, whether it leads to a riot, how the police respond to the riot. It was the police overreaction to the rioting that followed Michael Brown's death one hot August day this year that really underlined the fact that the police are going over the top and that they're just waiting for this kind of a confrontation to happen.
And what did you make of the President's response? Would you think it was deliberately unemotional?
Very much so, and very measured. Obviously, you're saying that there is a legal process that has to be respected. It was the role of the grand jurors to deliberate in this way. They have done that. We have to respect that. He's called on people to remain peaceful. He's quoted Michael Brown Sr., the young man's father, saying, "We don't want violence. We don't want this death to lead to more deaths." The President also talked, Julia, about the deep distrust between coloured people and law enforcement agents. Deep distrust was skirting around the issue of race to a certain extent. He also talked about the legacy of racial discrimination. Now, that's going to upset a lot of African Americans who say, hey, you're a black president, the first one we've had, and you're talking about a legacy of racial discrimination? Don't know what it's like in the White House, but out here in the real world, in Ferguson, Missouri, racial discrimination is happening every day, particularly to young black men.
Now, Heather Hewitt, if I could just ask you, because I understand that you were there when the riots about Rodney King occurred. Now, Don Betts, who's a former senator from Kansas, has said he believes this will be an even greater explosion of kind of anxiety and anger about race tension. What do you make of that, and what do you remember of that time?
Look, that may well be true. I find it extraordinary that it was 1990 when I was posted to Washington for the ABC, when the Rodney King issue happened. The extraordinary thing to me is that those tensions and that basic distrust of the system that blacks have in America is still there all these years on. And the striking thing about Rodney King was just how quickly those tensions erupted. So they're going to be, they've been simmering probably for all those years ever since. It's not going to take much, as we've already seen, for them to erupt even further after the decision that's been made.
What do you make of this, Bruce? Surely there's a lot of frustration that they've had, an African-American president, and yet it remains the same.
Well, we just had a young boy shot in America, two or 3 days ago. I was going to ask why a grand jury process when what's needed at this stage is transparency and openness. I mean, we've seen Julian Assange apparently convicted by a grand jury. These things are equivalent to a kangaroo court, it seems. So why did this occur in this way, do you think, John?
Well, it is a part, they maintained that it had to go through a due process, and for the police officer involved, there had to be a fair process to say whether this was an indictable offence, whether there was enough evidence. So one of the criticisms, though, that has been made, McCulloch, the prosecutor here, the St Louis prosecutor, being a white man, some people felt that just as the jury wasn't black enough, that the prosecutor wasn't black enough. But, you know, you could also similarly argue, well, it'd be completely inappropriate to say we're not going to use the person whose job it is to prosecute this case, we're going to bring in somebody else, or we're going to stack the jury. The thing to remember about Missouri as well, this is different to Los Angeles with a large African-American community. The state of Missouri has about 12% African-American, more than a lot of Midwestern states, but still it is an 85% white state. A suburb like Ferguson, it still has, it used to be a white neighbourhood, it's increasingly an African-American neighbourhood, but it still has the legacy of white law enforcement, majority white police force, and also local politicians. And still, St Louis is, you know, it's had a large African-American community, but still comparatively small. So there is this real disconnect between the community of Ferguson and the people who are there with the badges and the guns.